Let me tell you a story about a little school called Greenwood Elementary. It sat at the edge of a small town right between some gentle, rolling hills. It wasn't much to look at, old paint peeling off the walls, floors that creaked when you walked. But to the kids who went there, it was home. Most of them came from families who didn't have much, and these kids carried heavy worries, far bigger than kids their age should ever have to carry. One day, an old woman came to the school. Her name was Mrs. May. She had a sweet smile, her eyes were bright and full of kindness, and even though she walked with a limp and leaned on a wooden cane, she had a spark in her that made her seem younger than she looked. In her other hand, she carried a little pouch of seeds. The principal, Mr. Collins, met her at the gate. "Welcome, Mrs. May," he said. "What brings you here today?" Mrs. May looked around at the kids playing in the yard and smiled. "I'm here to plant a garden of hope," she said. Mr. Collins was a little confused. "A garden?" he asked. "Yes," she nodded. "I've heard that some of the kids here are going through hard times. I want to help. But instead of just giving money, I thought I'd teach them how to grow something beautiful." Soon enough, Mr. Collins gathered a group of students around her. These were kids that most teachers had already given up on. Kids who didn't pay attention in class or got into trouble. They were curious about Mrs. May and her little pouch of seeds. Mrs. May spoke softly, but her words carried weight. "In this pouch," she said, holding it up, "are seeds. Nothing fancy, just small and simple. But with a bit of care, patience, and love, they'll grow into beautiful flowers. I'm going to give each of you a few seeds, and I'll show you how to plant them. But after that, it'll be up to you to help them grow." The kids looked at the seeds in her hand, unsure. Tommy, a boy known for getting into fights, spoke up. "What if they don't grow?" he asked. Mrs. May knelt down to meet Tommy's eyes. "They'll grow, Tommy, because I believe you can help them. Just like these seeds, you might feel small and ordinary now, but with the right care, you can grow into something extraordinary." Over the next few weeks, the kids worked in the garden with Mrs. May's help. At first, it didn't seem like much was happening. The soil stayed the same day after day. Some of the kids started to lose hope, but Mrs. May kept coming back, encouraging them. "Be patient," she'd say. "Beautiful things take time." And then one morning, tiny green sprouts poked through the soil. The kids couldn't believe it. They gathered around, excited, watching those little sprouts grow a little taller each day. Soon, the garden was full of colorful flowers, each one different, each one beautiful. Tommy, the boy who always seemed to be in trouble, became the most dedicated gardener. He watered the plants, pulled out weeds, and took care of the garden like it was his own. As his flowers grew, something inside him grew too. He started paying attention in class, and the fights stopped. Lila, a shy girl who was always too scared to speak up, took care of the delicate flowers on the edge of the garden. As her flowers bloomed, so did her confidence. She started raising her hand in class, her voice soft but proud. When the garden was finally in full bloom, Mrs. May gathered the kids around it. "These flowers," she said, "are just like you. At first, you couldn't see it. But with time and a little care, you've all grown into something beautiful. There's no such thing as a bad seed, only seeds that need someone to believe in them." Mr. Collins watched from the side, tears in his eyes as he saw the pride and hope shining on the kids' faces. Mrs. May hadn't just planted a garden. She had planted something much deeper: belief. Before she left, Tommy ran up to her, holding a small flower he had picked from the garden. "Thank you, Mrs. May," he said softly. "I never thought I could grow something like this." Mrs. May knelt down and put her hand on his shoulder. "Tommy, you've always had it in you. You just needed to believe it." And with that, she left the school. But the garden of hope kept growing, and so did the kids. They had learned that just like those tiny seeds, they too could grow into something great, as long as someone believed in them.